What is the queer voice? And is it becoming swallowed up by the larger LGBTQ plus identity? Before we dive in, a disclaimer. The word queer has been used as a slur in the past, to the point where there are people who still don't feel comfortable with the label. However, it was reclaimed in the 1980s as one of the key branches of AIDS activism. So today, it is worn by many with pride and shares the Q in LGBTQ+, with the term questioning. Throughout my previous slang projects about sexual orientation, I often used LGBTQ+, gay, and queer interchangeably. The three are each umbrella terms in their own right. But while the first two terms stop at describing non-straight people, the term queer includes a dimension of activism in its identity. Han Cole, queer and trans health advisor at UC Santa Barbara Student Health, writes that queer as an umbrella term refers not just to a range of genders and sexualities, but to a specific political project that has to do with reclaiming and dismantling heterosexism and cissexism, which are both structures of oppression. Now, you may be wondering, why is this distinction different? After all, we've had openly gay officials at local levels, we've had LGBTQ+ congresspeople both in the Senate and in the House as well. We've even achieved marriage equality.
This is a spit in God's face.
It's tempting to think that LGBTQ+ inclusion is a done deal, that we are finally, after all these years, equal. Here's David Cicilline, currently the longest-serving LGBTQ+ member of Congress, affirming that message of equality in 2011.
Whether it's in public service or in other careers, that we look at the person and that their sexual orientation is irrelevant in those instances, and I think that's real progress.
Agreeing with him is Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, who was one of the top 3 presidential candidates in the 2020 elections before he dropped out.
I think that the fact that I'm standing here, the fact that my husband's in the audience watching right now, is just an amazing example of that belief that yes, you belong, and this country has a place for you.
These clips create a victorious story. LGBTQ+ groups have worked hard and they've won over equality, which we should celebrate. But when it comes to politics and activism, this voice can make continued efforts seem unnecessary, sweeping many unmet needs under the rug. In 28 states, we still have no legal statewide protection from discrimination in employment and housing when it comes to sexual orientation or gender identity. A 2017 study by Chaplain Howell at the University of Chicago writes that LGBT youth had a 120% higher risk of reporting homelessness when compared statistically to the average American young adult aged 18 to 25. 1 of every 10 employees has heard their own employer make negative comments about LGBTQ+ people. And this statistic has stayed constant across 10 years of the Human Rights Campaign making studies from 2008 to 2018. Now it is up to us whether we accept the status quo as good enough after we've redrawn the rules to fit ourselves, or if we push onwards for a future that can include everyone. The Center for Inter-American Studies at Bielefeld University writes in an encyclopedic entry that rather than being defined by what it is, like LGBTQ+ and gay, queer is often defined in opposition to that which it is not, primarily that which is normative. So, what is the queer voice? It is not straight, it is not afraid, it is not conforming. To identify as queer is to consider for ourselves every day what parts of our world we reject and which parts we keep. The language of queerness has been incorporated into the LGBTQ+ community that it has not been swallowed but actually amplifies the message of our communities. Here's David Cicilline again on the House floor, this time in 2016.
We've made great strides in terms of marriage equality. Members of the LGBT community still face significant discrimination in employment as well as a variety of other important areas of life.
And here's Queers Against Pete, a coalition of San Francisco activists protesting Buttigieg's fundraiser in the Castro because he was selling tickets for $1,000 each and ignoring the activists and residents of the historic queer district itself.
He has been using his gay card to propel his campaign up to this point, but he is not representative of our community. He may be representative of part, but not all, especially the most marginalized and disenfranchised ones. Pete has a record of dismantling houses in the South Bend in Indiana for Black and Latino communities.
And though equality has been achieved for some in the LGBTQ+ community, there is still a long road ahead. So we must all make a choice. Like politicians, either we will push for change or we will uphold structural inequities even while espousing legal equality. As Urvashi Vaid, an American LGBTQ+ rights activist, writes, "Outside is where queer began, not as a meme, but as the deep experience and memory of being different because of gender identity or sexual orientation. A queer future rests on remembering our difference, in the critical perspective it provides, and in the possibility of radical solidarity it affords with other outsiders." So if someone asks you if you support the LGBTQ+ community, before you say yes, ask yourself if you support the Q, the queer part of the community. Because the extra step between gay and queer makes all the difference.